welcome back here to the Air Crash Investigator, and today I'm going to talk about something that happens actually quite a lot, and that is where we get hydraulic failure. And right from the beginning, I want to say that hydraulic failure does not necessarily mean that it is the actual system that failed, but it could be that the system was disabled. However, let's carry on. First of all, just a shout out there for Seams Aviation Training, and it's an online platform. You can get all the courses that you want right there. Today's review has got to do with this A350. It is a B3 Squirrel. This is an Airbus helicopter, also referred to as a Squirrel. Just a reminder, it will help quite a bit if you subscribe. And there I've got the channel as well, where you can get hold of the rest. There's probably about 40 or 50 videos already. Great. First thing we're going to talk about is the sequence of events. And I really just want to get in here with the sequence of events and say, whoa, let's just think of that. The helicopter went in, I believe, for a service. It came out, nothing wrong with the helicopter. Pilot started up, and then things went pear-shaped. Now, why I was interested in this specific accident was how small, relatively small, the oversight or the mistake can be in what we do, and how huge the results can be. So let's just go through one. The helicopter started up. Pilot unlocked the collective pitch. He then did the hydraulic test. The hydraulic test was inadvertently left in the on position. Right, he did the other parts of the hydraulic test, everything, got the radio, removed his left hand from the collective pitch to adjust the radio volume. But by that time, he'd already taken off he unlocked the control with his left hand by pressing it down, and then it clips out, it unlocks, and then he took his left hand off. And at that moment, the collective pitch just shot up to the top. That has happened to me in other types, which I don't want to mention now. So there's two reasons for this going up. It could be the very natural sort of interactions, but it could also mean that the friction wasn't set correct. There's a lot of things, and sometimes I believe there is a setting that it doesn't have to be that violent. Nevertheless, it's actually shot up to the top. That probably had to do something with the hydraulics, which then becomes that it wants to, the moment that the hydraulics are off. Remember now the pilot had switched on the hydraulics, and I'll show it on the controls later on. But that one test, the hydraulic test button, not just in all probability, they found it after the accident, that he pressed it, but he didn't depress it. So he switched it on for the test, but he never switched it off after the test, which actually left the accumulator completely isolated at this stage. Okay, the center rapidly up to the top. Helicopter took off as a consequence, and believe me, that is a pretty strong machine. It would immediately have jumped into the air. Said the cyclic went very stiff. We said there's no hydraulics, and the helicopter swung to the left, and the yaw pedals appeared to be ineffective. In other words, we would never know if he exerted or the opposite rudder that he possibly could, and as hard as he possibly could, because they become horrifically stiff. But at this stage of the game, the pilot felt that he had no control over that. That perception is what he had, and his reactions were according to that. With pitch down and slightly rowed to the right, the nose pitching down now, and the main rudder blades contacted the ground. He lowered the collective pitch, right inside impacted first, and it obviously then rolled over. Post-impact fire, and there was just minor injuries to himself and really nobody else. I just want to get it over to everybody that this happens so fast. There is no 17 seconds to discover what did you not do right, or what did you actually do wrong, what did you omit or whatever. These things are instantaneous. So common causes to hydraulic failure. I've got to, unfortunately, be on your face again just to say, remember, these are common causes. I'm not saying that these causes are all because of this specific accident, because from now on, I just want to generalize a little bit so that when we look at the videos of the different parts where helicopters go, each one has got their own story. A common thing would be there's a system failure. I have never had in single engine helicopters or lighter helicopters hydraulic failure where the system failed. Okay. Now the next one is improper pre-takeoff checks, and in this case this applies here. Insufficient system knowledge, technical handling and emergencies. Do I say that this pilot had insufficient blah blah blah? Well, yes. He might have flown it before only a few hours and he was away from the helicopter for a long time. He came back. I don't think the real truth or the real ramifications in terms of the technical side of the helicopter was refreshed. And therefore the pilot didn't, in the back of his mind, felt that this was such a crucial and that was worth double checking. Inadvertent switching off of the hydraulics in the hover. Now, that switching off in the hover has happened many a time. That is where the pilot sits in flying, and in the older versions of the Robinson 44, the hydraulic switch on the cyclist was unguarded, and somebody would just move over it and it would switch off. That has happened, well, with me as well. And I can tell you, it's a horrible to all of a sudden notice, my goodness, something is going wrong. Am I losing control? But then you need to stabilize the helicopter. That's the first thing. You can panic a little bit later, but first you do that. But if you haven't got the skills, that is a little bit of a problem. Then we had many cases where people tried to, the right-hand door went open and they leaned across and they tried and they start losing it here and they tap the hydraulic switch and it went off and stuff like that. Robinson did redesign it. But remember, switching off in the wrong sequences and doing the wrong stuff always will be a problem. Okay, inadvertently switching the hydraulics off in the cruise. That is a bad one, but the procedure is quite easy. You just bring the speed down to, I just say to the guys, anything between 60 and 70 knots, you'll probably be okay. And stabilize the machine before you do anything else. But here is the poor capability to fly a helicopter during hydraulic emergencies. How do you get the aircraft to stabilize? Now, I want to be very upfront here right in the beginning. If you look at the books that Airbus would give out, they'll say you shouldn't do it here and you shouldn't do it there. They want us to do it in the cruise and then do a skid-on landing, but never in the hover, never in as you just go forward. That is when you are so vulnerable. Any loss in the moment you go forward is the natural, what that people want to do is they just want to plonk it down. But you can't just plonk it down because you first got to stabilize the platform because it's now all over the show. And you've got to get in rhythm because you will be overcorrecting all the time. You've got to tuck your top in and you've got to sit there and you've got to stabilize it. And everything is heavy. The left hand feels like you're picking up the real helicopter. The right hand is stiff. It's there. And your pedals become extremely stiff. Pilots are not recent. Now, recency is being capable to... Now, in this case, there was a gap of 10, I don't know how many years, between last when the pilot flew a few hours on that and where he came back now. Accomplished helicopter pilot, and he was going to do game rate work, and that's fine. But when you do the recency check on somebody like that, to fly around the park and look at animals and show the areas where we are and use it as a orientation flight, that is needed. I agree with it. But boy, oh boy, when somebody comes back from that long time, we're going to go through each and every emergency until we've done all of them. And you can't do all of them in an hour. And if the candidate then struggles a bit, put in another hour. It's 15,000 Rand. Compared to the millions lying on the ground down in shreds, I am not so sure. So I'm talking to the instructors now. Don't make it easy on the guys when you do their renewals and stuff. I know we all want to be friends and it's all cool, but it's not cool. Okay, pilots do not. Yeah, this one I found many times, and although say you shouldn't cut it there and there and there, in the various types, what I actually do is as the person goes forward, I cut the hydraulics. But my hands and feet are 100% on waiting now, because I know the first thing that you're going to do is stabilize. And I promise you, instructors, listen to me. Whoever you go, if you do that, you got to be as sharp as we used to say a menorah blade, but anyway, a razor blade, if I can put it that way. But remember, you've got to teach the candidate to first stabilize the platform before you want to attempt something like even a skid-on or a roll-on or a hover landing. Sometimes you can't. I mean, if you lose it and you've got a spot and you've got to do a hover landing, all right. So depending on the environment that a person is working in, very important. I say that at the top, probably very tongue-in-cheek, at this moment in time, one small slip for pilot, one huge slip for the company. And yes, the rhythm of that saying I stole from the Apollo moon landing, which wasn't meant to be in this. But I need you to come back here and have a look. It is the small things that the pilots will do wrong at the end of the day that could be horrendously expensive to the company and detrimental. So the end of the day is we don't need to point fingers. But the only people that can make sure that the pilots are right and ready for those small little jackals in your vineyard is to make sure that the instructor does his job. Okay, and then I say, many hydraulic failures are self-induced. So if I start comparing those that happen due to just the mechanical failures versus those where the pilot inadvertently switched it off or didn't do the right stuff, then the actual mechanical failures are less than the self-induced. So now here, let me get on the full picture. I've got the same type of aircraft here, and you can see here at the bottom here, I've showed where that little switch is, and you can see it's a covered switch. Here, if you go to the EC120, you'll see there is your crank switch is covered, and right next to it here, there is your accumulated test, but also with a cover. The problem with the cover is that if you lift the cover off and you press it, and you leave it inside and you close the cover, so the cover is there so you don't inadvertently press it. But now if you have pressed it, because that's one of the checks, press it, feel if everything is right, you've got to go and disarm or switch off, if you wish, this bypass that you have just done for the test. That is pretty much so. But let's have a look, and here is a compilation of a few things. So let's just have a look.
The accident helicopter lifts off without pausing and immediately begins to rotate to the left. The counterclockwise spin continued several times. On the upper left side of the screen, you can see the parking lot where the helicopter crashed and the post-crash fire. The accident flight lasted about 32 seconds. Ground impact showed fuel on the pavement near the helicopter 3.7 seconds after impact, and fire was first visible 0.2 seconds later.
can see by this wreckage, a couple of cars are involved in that wreckage where the chopper did go down there, right in front of the Space Needle, and that fired water on the burning wreckage, which includes the helicopter and at least one or two cars that look like they...
All right, welcome back here from looking at this. Now, the first thing I want to say about the hydraulic failures that you see, the bigger helicopters, two systems, and it would not necessarily be possible for them to have inadvertently switched off. So I believe there was some kind of hydraulic failure. And sometimes when they say it's hydraulic failure, it may not have been hydraulic failure, but something else. Remember, your bigger helicopters will use hydraulics in their autopilot system. And if you lose the hydraulics, that has happened in the big helicopter with me quite a few times, where you lose the autopilot hydraulics and she becomes very stiff and hard to fly. Okay. But the big thing is, it is not an uncontrollable situation. But if you've never been exposed to it, if you have never been challenged with it, it's going to take you a while to figure it out. And remember, normally, there is no little while available. Because once you set up motions to go to the ground or wherever, I mean, that's it. So I say one must know the technical issues behind the interfacing with the machine in a specific environment. Sure, there's two things I mentioned that I said, how to interface with the machine, and from a technical point of view, that's correct. Then from the environment in which you are, you also need to be able to understand how not to put up rates of descent or rates of turns, and things must be stopped and stabilized before it gathers momentum. When on the ground, keep the CP, the collective pitch, locked, only to be released when starting the takeoff. Here's the rule. When you land, you lock the collective. Are there helicopters where that is not necessary? There is a few that hasn't got locks. Like, for instance, your R22, R40, they haven't got locks, but they've got frictions. But when you get to helicopters like this, they've physically got locks. So the moment that the collective goes down, that lock gets into place so that you can take your left hand off. If you take your left hand off and you're on the ground with the collective not locked, you need to get slapped. Once warned. While you teach the first time, you warn the second time, and the third time, and said to me, Charlie, but you can't say pain. Guys, there's, I've listened to everybody. If you increase the pain, then we can't learn in that environment. Don't talk nonsense. When we grew up, I learned the quickest when my dad, got to option 3. Don't want to get that. Never take your hand off the collective pitch pre-takeoff helicopter if the console not locked or auto-stabilized in the air. Now, there I just added the auto-stabilization in the air. Remember that if the auto-stabilization system is off, you don't take your hand off the collective pitch, not if you are below 200 feet. That's the general rule. You can rather make that like 400 feet. Then you're doing it in the more safer side. Then line checks must include adverse decision making. What I mean by adverse decision making is, come on, guys and girls, to have just the easy line check and to check being out, doesn't matter whether you're flying under the European or the American or the South African laws, it all means the same. When you go and test somebody, you must make sure that that person can handle it, not, well, obviously under normal circumstances, but you'll see everybody can do that. There is no skill in flying straight and level on an autopilot. Zero. You can fly straight and level with your autopilot for 5 hours or 10 hours on. It didn't fly. I'm not breaking it. I want it there. And I also like to use it when I do long trips to do that, because to do it by hand all the time just increases the uncomfort and increases the ability or the possibility of something going wrong. Okay? So the point here is, you can only test somebody under adverse if something goes wrong. Put pressure on the person. Make it an uncomfortable situation. Because once the hand and feet can work together, but can the brain And can the brain figure out options when there are apparently no options? Operator efficiency checks on the license checks must include checks competent to the pilot regarding the normal as well as the emergency. I'm just repeating that. Never skip difficult emergencies. They are the ones that will keep everybody honest. Now, what it means by honesty is you can see, and I've seen it here with pilots where they get an engine cut, they land the aircraft, and there's no problem with it, and you go back and you will see, but this pilot, he practiced his whole life to be able to handle this. No, he didn't become traumatized pre the thing. He became very competent beforehand. And when the stuff struck the fan, he had the ability to recover, stabilize the helicopter, land the helicopter, walk away from it, and saved the whole thing. The only thing that's going to come out is the engine. Then basic flying, as a rule, is the easiest thing to do, but emergencies require advanced capabilities. All right, so the final word, please, please. If you are used to being tested by a friend that makes it just an easy thing, tell your friend, let's have it friendly, but give me hell. Well, see you in the next one.